I guess a little introduction into the topic is in order. Um, Basically, this is something that precipitated from I was going to say just Paul, but not even just Paul. Like there was a lot of discussion surrounding um, what the interplay between casuals and competitive at RIW, what that looked like, and at a higher level, what that meant regarding like some philosophy document work that we've been conducting over the past, what is it, like 6, 8 months now?
Yeah, a while.
So,
I mean, we talked about it before then too. This has been like what, a year and a half in the works? Yeah.
Yeah, kind of off and on for a while.
so yeah, just kind of we wanted to take the opportunity. Not very many people know that there is something like that kind of happening behind the scenes. So part of the goal with this is to kind of quiet the villagers and say, yes, we are diligently and perpetually working behind the scenes. You know, we're earning that hard-earned money that we get paid.
We get
All
paid.
those internet dollars, yeah. So I can buy my cards, buy my commons. Yeah.
So yeah, just one of those things that we're one of the items that we're perpetually just kind of discussing and trying to implement and streamline and that sort of thing. And RIW a few weeks ago kind of um, didn't bring it to a head per se, but like brought it to a more superficial surface level to where it was like apparent, like we were living and breathing the thing. So
What
yeah,
I kept saying was it took things from that were like theories or hypotheticals before and really gave us an extra layer of proof. Like we all had our various views of what Pauper Commander looked like from the way we'd been playing for years on our own, and just pulling together this completely new meta of people that most of us hadn't played together before kind of gave us a very fresh take on it and confirmed that the things we were saying weren't purely based on just who we'd been playing with locally or,
Yeah.
the people we'd been regularly playing with online.
Yeah, and I mean, there's something said like for a long time we were very able to just kind of draft off of like the Commander Philosophy Document, as it has existed, because it aligns very closely with how we've been managing the format thus far. But there are kind of like market differences, and that's kind of why we wanted to come up with something that's kind of unique to us, just because, as we'll talk about, like, and this is something that I've talked about many places with many people, is that like the delta between competitive Pauper Commander and casual Pauper Commander, in the way that like most people understand what those terms to mean, right? Like competitive versus casual, it's much narrower in this format than it is in like Commander. So it kind of necessitates, I think, articulation in terms of how we approach that and what that actually means in this context.
and to pair on that, we have I was gonna say like my gut reaction was to say like a strict willingness. Like we have a definite vocal intention of having a united format. You know, we've talked about it previously in terms of a spectrum, but some of us think of it more of a circle, like this never-ending. But I mean, however a person perceives it, there is one thing that sets us apart, and by and large, like it's a credit to why I feel like I'm here is uh, we treat it as one house, as one village, as all encompassing, and
Yep.
that's found nowhere else. Nowhere else. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
I always talk about it in terms of like the power gap between how you define casual and competitive, and that's narrower. And just the reason that's relevant at RIW is because we saw a lot of decks that a lot of people would in the online meta say that's not competitive. You shouldn't bring that to a tournament, and they did just fine.
Yeah. I mean, it goes a long way to kind of showing how people can just kind of like misunderstand um, kind of what games can look like in the wild, right? Like what a competitive game looks like out in the world versus the insular, meta games that we're maybe more used to. in terms of like where people just have a very kind of common understanding of what everyone's about and kind of what they're doing. Whereas like somebody playing competitively, whereas they may not play the most powerful deck in a vacuum, they play it as like hard as they can. And that'll yield oftentimes like very similar results to playing a very powerful deck in a competitive game, right? Like it all depends on kind of how you approach it, what you're doing, and how you leverage what you're doing against what everyone else is doing. And that's highly variable. And it's never going to be something like, 4 tierless decks make a competitive game, right? I think that's insane. So it was really cool to see all that at RIW. Yeah.
Just letting it fly by.
Yeah. I mean, there's been a lot of chatter on like the Connoisseurs Discord lately about like what is a competitive deck or like what makes something competitive. And like honestly, it's a conversation that really grinds my gears a little bit, because I think the more you try and define these things, the more exclusive you end up being. Everybody, I mean, there's a need, I think, amongst intelligent people to label these things in a way that's like grokkable, but I mean, it's very easy to overthink it, and it's a much simpler concept, I think, than people are willing to realize.
So not that I try to provide parental advice in those circumstances, but the way that I'm providing this unsolicited advice to the developing cadre of pros that are coming out of the competitive side is like, you got to think about it holistically in the fact that if you're pushing the spectrum in one direction, it doesn't negate the existence of the rest of it. So if you're just solely focused on this one end, you're going to get got. Somebody's gonna bring a damn Viscopa and and get you.
Or even like a more extreme example is someone's going to bring Risen Reef with no combos and get you. Just attack you with flyers till you're dead. I mean, that's all you need to do, right?
Because you have a card advantage in the
you're just drawing cards. You have some interaction, and then you just play creatures that attack people. And a lot of people they overthink things so much that they don't realize that like the game can be that simple. It can come down to those resources. That's why like I'm very thankful for like my experience playing like limited Magic, for example, like sealed deck and draft. It prepares you really well for Pauper Commander in a competitive and a casual sense, because it really teaches you like what resources are important. It translates very cleanly across contexts. And like much like sealed, a game of competitive Pauper Commander can very, very easily come down to who is left with the biggest creature on the board once everybody used their interaction. Right.
So I saw some interesting debate about whether that was a good thing or not. Like there's,
good how?
It's some people I think have this idea in their head that relying on politics to win is somehow negative. And they, like, I've seen the term playing possum, and I mean, sure, you can take that to a negative extreme, but the way I see it used a lot is as a catch-all for anyone that says, I'm not in a strong position right now. Oh, they must be playing in some kind of cowardly or less than competitive nature. And I don't think that's the case.
Right. It's a lot like poker, right? Like you're playing your opponents, not necessarily just their cards. That's how I approach it. That's how I approach playing competitively in a multiplayer environment, because it's not 1v1, right? Like this is, I've used this term before in private conversations, but it's something that we kind of refer to as like CEDH brain rot, where it's just like the most powerful deck doing the most powerful thing. That's what should win. Because those decks are much more capable of doing that. They don't need to rely on like the board nearly as much as like a Pauper Commander deck might. They can like win out of nowhere. They can. Well,
thanks to you guys, I've actually had to modify my playstyle. I mean, I'm known, at least I think I'm known, as a very in-your-face, aggressive player. Well, smart people like you will actually leverage that and just allow me just to do whatever it is that I'm doing, carte blanche, and then.
Well, yeah. Like you remember the games we played with Islane a few weeks ago.
Oh, you handed me my ass.
Yeah, I mean, I identified what you were doing, and I realized that like you were setting the momentum in that game, and but I had to contextualize my role as how do I exploit what you're doing so that I can eke out a win. And it wasn't necessarily about playing possum; it was about leveraging my resources in a very specific way.
Which could be interpreted as playing possum.
It could, yeah, but I don't think it is. I think it's just kind of a term that people use to describe people who, maybe don't play out all of their things. Like hold stuff back and slow roll and those sorts of things. It's not necessarily playing possum. It's just like you're not giving them as much information as they would like to identify what you're doing and counteract it in a meaningful way. And sometimes that frustrates people, and they look for kind of excuses how they can like brush it off, right? But they just got.
Yeah.
But tying that back into RIW, so what Derek was saying about sometimes it's just the deck that has the biggest creature left. We saw that a lot with these mixed pods that we encountered of half combo decks, half mid-range decks, or an aggro and 2 mid-range decks and a combo deck. And there would be, if the combo player didn't get to do their thing and got beaten down, then it was all about jockeying and who spent the most resources on taking down the combo player or limiting the other players at the table. And it, in a lot of ways, that dynamic played to the advantage politically of the decks that were seen as lower power at the table.
Yeah, I mean, again, to circle back to the Risen Reef deck, like there were a couple games I saw where he was just attacking people for 2 every turn with like a Cloudkin Seer, and that was pretty much it. Just had like counter spells and things to block with, and that was the extent of it. And just nobody felt like it was a dangerous thing to deal with, and everyone ran out of cards, and he just attacked.
2 damage, 2 damage, 2 damage. I mean, that's that adds up. Connor.
Yeah, and same thing with like the Aranis Urchin player. Like he has a Fang Dragon in the list, and you just play it and you just attack people for 6 in the air, right? Like it's not a fancy card, but it does
no
the
big
job.
deal. No big deal.
Yeah.
I want to reach out to my man Connor there and bring him into the conversation. Forgive me for not doing an introduction. I feel like if you don't know who these gentlemen are at this point in time, well, number one, shame on you, but also welcome.
If you don't know who I am, I haven't done a very good job of marketing myself, so that's on me.
So Derek, Paul, Connor, Ruffigan, Scarecrow, and Derek.
Eric, yeah, my name's the same everywhere.
Yeah. So Connor, give me some thoughts, my man.
But yeah, even like the games, like the most lopsided games that happened at the tournament with Dallas's Disciple of Deceit deck, where he won on turn 4 in a game, he won on turn 4 or turn 5 in a game that I played. Those games basically just came down to people not having enough removal. Like that was the difference between whether the competitive or the more casual decks were like competing on an even level, was just like removal. So I mean that very different than a lot of other formats.
And my game with Dallas, he almost comboed off. I think it was turn 3 or 4. And I could really just point to it. It was greed for me. I wanted to get off a Siphon Mind, and then next turn hold up interaction for him. And he was just moving a little faster than I expected. So he almost pulled off an early win there and just whiffed a little bit. So it wasn't a lack of being able to interact. It was greed on my part.
I got to see you be, I don't want to say not yourself, but a person outside of what I expected you to be as a player. Like you came to game, my friend.
Oh yeah, Ryan seemed very surprised when he made the comment about me having a silvery tongue.
Yeah.
So I mean that's kind of pivoting or pairing off of that. I perceive this kind of as I'm processing this in real time. I was going to say a lot of casual players. So bridging the gap between casual and competitive, a lot of casual players are somewhat matter of fact about what they're bringing to the game. So they may or may not feel like they would need to leverage politics the same way as a competitive player. And Derek put this very cleanly a few minutes ago. I am a tool as his opponent. I am a tool that can be leveraged by him. So that means my play actions, that means my attitude in game, that means the cards in my hand, all of that. So in a lot of ways, casual players aren't necessarily thinking of the other 3 players with full grips as an extra 21 cards in their hand. They're
Right.
not thinking about it from that perspective. They're just kind of
Yeah,
trying
and
to.
in fact, the conventional wisdom tells people that you just have that many more opponents rather than like resources available to you. Like an aggro deck needs to be able to do 90 damage kind of thing, which is
Yeah.
silly. But I think a lot of the politicking and kind of playing your opponents kind of stuff that I and Paul like to do a lot. It's not favorable to a lot of competitive players because they're very. It's not something that you can quantify, or it's not something that you can lean on, or they don't feel comfortable leaning on it because it's going to change game to game who you're playing with. You might not know how to play those players, or they may not be as adept at it.
I think there's also
trust.
this feeling of when the power level between decks goes down, the power of politics stays the same. So it seems like the power of politics is going up as that power gap goes down. And I think to some people that have really poured their heart and souls into every individual card choice in their deck, they've made this finely honed weapon. And to feel like politics determine everything, I could see it making them feel like politics is devaluing their card choices.
Sure. Yeah. If you're not beating their cards with your cards, then people can feel like you're playing a different game. They can feel like they're being kind of cheated on the experience a little bit. But if you're playing competitively, the goal is to win. That's the one thing that everyone can agree on. How you win, I don't care. It should just matter that you're coming there with the same mindset. You're there to defeat the other players just the same as they are. And I don't think that it's fair to kind of say you can't play in this way because that's not competitive. It's a mindset more than anything else, and the cards are just tools that we use to express that mindset on the battlefield. So yeah, I think it's silly. I think I'm a guy that builds decks and plays Magic, and I know I've told you this, Clay. I kind of think of it like the Cat Burglar safe cracker that can unlock all the safes by touch. Like you're up to the thing and turning the dial. I don't have systems. I don't have rubrics. I just build decks until they feel right to me, and I play the way that feels right to me. That's just how I do it, and that's not how a lot of people like to envision what competitive Magic can look like. But I think in Pauper Commander and Commander to a lesser extent, it's a social multiplayer format, so things change. It's not going to be the same exact metrics as 60 card 1v1 competitive Magic, and you can't look at it the same way. There are other factors to consider. I think people ignore them to their detriment.
People. Yeah, unless you're playing the same three people, yeah. So
yeah. But it's not easy to do.
So just kind of trying to draw it back to the RIW topic. Clay, I know you put out the Moxfield lists that you got from RIW. And so there's 44 total. And I went through just doing a little tally today of like how many were, competitive, like well-known quantities.
Like established decks, yeah.
Right. Versus things that people would be like, that's not competitive. If like the people who gatekeep, perhaps, but or even just like, oh, it's fringe. Just the point is they're not known for being the top tier you would expect them in an online meta CPDH game. And I actually got some really interesting numbers. I kept saying
we should guess. We should all guess the number.
All right, so 44. How many do you think were casual?
Connor?
Say about half.
22. All right.
Yeah, like 15 to 20, somewhere in there, I guess.
I think about half, maybe even like 60%. Now that's just me doing a tally, because I've had the benefit of not only entering the list in, but like probably 50 to 60%.
Yeah.
So there's definitely some gray area in here and judgment calls, but I came out with 20 casual, 24 competitive. And that's counting things like Sir Conrad, Grey Merchant of Asphodel, Combo, E-Sphinx, Arenas Street Urchin, and Bobby's Floodgate, which is just, flicker combo with
stuff that's not not in the conversation, stuff that's kind of out of favor.
I was counting those as competitive, but there were a lot of other things like Mahadi and Mayhem Devil, that, I put them on the casual side, but maybe they could be considered a bit competitive as well. Same with the Sprite Dragons, even though they're not the standard Crackling Drake, they are playing much the same game plan. So there were kind of a handful on each side, and it still really feels like it balances out to about half. And so we keep talking about this mixed meta, and I just wanted to bring that up to emphasize, like, a lot of these games were half and half. It wasn't like, always 3 competitive, 1 casual, or vice versa. Like, a lot of them really were just half and half down the middle. Like, for example, me and Connor's first game was we had Sprite Dragon, Gut, 2 more typical looking competitive decks, even if the Sprite Dragon was built for 1v1. Still, counterspells, storm, kill people quickly. Like, it plays more the aggro role, but it still does some competitive things. And then you've got me and Connor playing kind of dirtily. We'll let you all fight it out while we slowly try to find our combo pieces and assemble a board state and pay attention. You all pay attention to each other. And those kind of games, I think, threw in a lot of play dynamics that maybe the CPDH crowd weren't quite ready for.
I think it's easy to kind of. I think it's easy to kind of get lost in, like, the fact that with a competitive Pauper Commander deck and like a more casual Pauper Commander deck, they're essentially still playing the same game of Magic, as opposed to like a casual Commander deck and a competitive EDH deck. They're like 2 ships passing in the night, 1 ship's moving 10 times faster, right? In Pauper Commander, it doesn't work that way. They still have to like be considerate of what's going on because everything's so board focused. Even the combo decks require like a board presence to execute most of the time, with like few exceptions. Whether that's with like land auras or land and tappers or Peregrine Drake, Archaeomancers, those sorts of things. Like, it's all permanent, very permanent based.
Or just have the commander in play.
Yeah, exactly. So it's always something where like the fundamentals of the game are going to be shared amongst all the decks that are playing, in a way that doesn't manifest in like Commander or EDH. And I feel like, again, like CDH brain rot, right? Like, people don't think of it that way. It's competitive versus casual, so therefore they must be 2 different things, and one must be like way more tuned and well oiled, and was just going to blow everything out of the water. Well, that doesn't matter because you're still fundamentally playing the same game of Magic.
I mean, and to be fair, there is some credence, and you touched on it. There is some credence in trying to assemble a game plan more quickly. But that comes at a sacrifice. So you're actually in streamlining your deck to be more redundant. You actually lose some sort of redundancy in your capability to attack, block. So like there's a sacrifice for the efficiency, for the speed, and if you can't capitalize on that, then there becomes a nexus by which the casual decks are indeed on par, if not because they're making the same land drops you are, and they're putting mana. I want to say the mana, not efficient, but they're the spells that they're playing, the creatures that they're playing are impactful because they're kind of like on that, I don't want to say casual curve, but I think you guys know what I'm saying. I'm not
putting
playing
resources on the board.
Yes, they're putting things in that meaningfully affect the board versus a ritual which does nothing but accelerate. Yeah. So,
like I said this before, like a 5/5 for 4 mana, 5 mana, whatever. Like that's a significant threat to a competitive deck in this format. In a way that's just not anywhere else.
Going
back to that game with Dallas, if his combo had been stopped, I don't know what he would have done against the Mother of Runes deck, who had like 10 power on the board with protection.
Yeah, that's definitely the sense I got from playing against Dallas's deck too. Is it's the classic glass cannon. If you stop it once, maybe twice, it's going to be a while before he gets back on plan. So earlier we kind of mentioned how we had a lot of ideas that we had formed separately and espoused in the past about how the power levels relate to each other and how games go when you mix power levels. And one of those ideas that I had espoused in the past was the idea that aggro could be a counterweight to combo in the competitive scene. And for the longest time, it didn't seem like that was going to be the case as long as we had a meta that was filled with combo decks. And, one aggro deck can't check 3 combo decks in the same pod. And even as we've gotten into whatever you want to call it, the last year of more aggro or at least aggressive mid-range decks, and it's easy to point to Gut and say that that's the only reason that's working in the competitive sphere because of Gut's power. And what I thought I saw at this tournament, I would love to hear you all chime in, and if you all saw this too, was that it wasn't necessarily Gut. We saw other aggressive decks that were weren't even known competitive powerhouses that were able to beat down combo decks before they did anything. Like Chris from One More Game brought Weavers, and I think it was him that was in the first game with Liam, I think. And like Liam's on mono white Falconer Adept, I think it was. And him and the other people in that pod beat down Weavers before they could do anything.
And to touch on that really quickly, a lot of folks use the term like they use the gang beatingness of the pod to determine like, oh, well, that deck must be a threat. And I was like, okay, so the credit that you're not giving to the other opponents is if they're playing an aggro deck, they're not going to hold back resources. That's their job, is to deploy and smash your face in. So if you have an aggro deck and a mid-range deck that's geared that way as well, like you're going to have all of this power put onto the board, and like that's the combo player's role, is to take that to the face, And
that's like kind of the funny thing is like in a dynamic like that where it's like one combo deck and 3 aggressive decks that are just going to like all attack them. Like I think it's incumbent on like if I was playing that pod, I attack one of the other players. Honestly, like do I need 3 people to beat down one combo deck? Like 2 people can do it. I can start leveraging my pressure against one, like setting up for when they're dead. It's that kind of thing. They're doing my job for me, so I can do something else.
I think it was Sniffhow on the Tuesday after we got back. He was talking to the pals and telling them all about the experience, and he was going through all of his games, and I think he had 1 or 2 where he was the only person really beating down, and he didn't necessarily feel like he was doing a great job of it, but it seemed like his impression was constantly there was a chance. It wasn't hopeless. He was doing his thing, and there was a window of opportunity. That sounds like a lot of the metrics I hear for how people enjoy games even when they don't win.
Yeah, it very rarely feels like hopeless,
So on the competitive side, because I don't know the casual side very well, so I can't speak to that. The relationship of the archetypes to one another, we're still fleshing that out, and it's by and large it's actually thanks to I don't want to call you guys casuals because you guys do have a somewhat of a competitive spirit.
Yeah, I can do both.
Yeah. So, but it is games with you guys that have like shaped my thinking in like the old mantra of the aggro player attacks the combo player. Maybe that's not completely true, and then that developed in my mind. That developed into, okay, maybe the aggro player needs to split between 2 people, and that may not be completely true, right, Derek?
It's not completely true.
So maybe it's actually the impetus is on the aggro player to find a way to attack the opposing 3 players at the same time, so that way they're contributing to that grand life loss, that ubiquitous life loss that's happening. Because going back to what Paul said earlier about, or maybe Derek said earlier about having to do 90 damage is not the case. You only have to do 30.
I mean, it also
most of the time.
It also doesn't have to be all about life loss either. Like it could be you only half-heartedly attack the combo player and you're banking resources for as soon as they're out of the way. And sure, you have a response if they try to pull anything, but you'd rather wait and use that to kill
Yeah.
the others.
Oftentimes you don't need to kill anybody. Like the game that Clay and I keep kind of bouncing back to that we played in, he was playing Gut Leader and was an E-Sphinx deck and an Abdel deck. And I was playing Heritage Shud, and I had a really clunky start, so I wasn't really doing a whole lot for the first few turns. And Clay was online, churning out skeletons, splitting attacks on both of them. So I didn't need to do anything. I just let him do that, and I just kind of developed my resources a little bit, built up a board until the point where I could attack Clay to the point where I could kill him in one more successive attack if I chose to do so. So that just really puts him in a terrible spot to figure out what he needs to do.
Early in the game, Derek attacked into me, and I sacrificed my arsonist.
Right.
Hit the Heritage Druid.
Yeah, I had to do that. Yeah.
So I did, in my mind at the time, thought that he was. We use the term time walked. I thought he was set back for at least a couple of turns. By the time I turned my attention back, it was too late.
Yep.
So I should have been deploying, because I think I had 3 skeletons online at any one time. So it probably should have been. I should have been attacking you to get you into the game.
Right. Yeah. It's about putting people in a position where they can't leverage the life total as a resource as effectively anymore, which is something that some people do very effectively. Some people are not good at it at all. That's another thing that you can draw on, like as a political tool, is like figuring out how willing people are to not block, and just kind of like get free attacks in with stuff that like I make so many bad attacks because I know people won't block. It's like you pick up so many points with these things, but again, like it's so hard to quantify. And there's no like hard and fast rules to it. It's all intuition, which is why people, I think, have a hard time like looking at it as kind of like part of a cohesive competitive philosophy, because it's not 100% reliable, right? Like you can get blown out by your own hubris, and that's happened to me too. When people just don't act as you intuit them to have to act. But again, like it's so much more robust because like these things are important exactly because of the way that the battlefield matters in this format.
So, hey Derek. So I keep trying to ask you guys that were commentating what you saw when you were running around, and I've been having a hard time getting good answers.
Like deck lists or what?
Well, just you all got to wander around and see a lot more games than any of us that were actually playing.
Yeah, the happenings, the culture, what. Yeah, what was?
Yeah, it had a very. I mean, some tables had a much more like locked in kind of vibe. Mostly the ones that like our circle were playing in, like the more seasoned like competitive players. Most of them were just kind of like the environment seemed very casual to me. People just having fun and playing Magic and doing so with the intent to win the game. It wasn't particularly sharky. It wasn't particularly cutthroat from what I saw, except for the kid that punked out Chris with the Sprite Dragon in round 1. That was kind of funny. But I mean, it was a pretty lighthearted event overall in terms of the games that I saw, which was good to see. And like you said, Paul, like there are a lot of all the pod and Connor, you mentioned this, all the pods were very mixed. So it wasn't like, real Surreal and Gut Leader and Abdel and Gretchen pods all the time or whatever. There was some stuff mixed in like Abomination of Llanowar, Mother of Runes, Emoti, those sorts of things. So yeah, I mean that's mostly what I saw. It was just a very relaxed kind of environment, but everyone was still, you could tell like they're trying to win for the most part. I mean there wasn't a lack of focus in that regard.
Well, there was what I had heard from some of the locals is like, this is a 1K. There's potential of $1,000 total. So even the more casually minded players understood that there was money on the line.
Right, there's stakes, yeah, for sure.
So.
Yeah, that money could buy a lot of stakes.
Or a lot of commons, yeah.
Yeah, rub it in.
A lot of server time for the home base.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, thanks, buddy.
No, 5 years. 5 years, there we go.
Yeah, that was a nice gesture of you. So.
I mean, I told you all I hate being in the spotlight, so how can I deflect attention away from me? I'm giving it to the site. I'm giving it to the site.
It's no problem now.
To me.
You better man than I am. I'm going down to the bottle barn and get myself a nice, 18-year-old bottle of something.
El Taco for everybody.
You want
On
some
the
of this?
house.
You're gonna have to turn up.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
just last bit that I was hoping to get out of Derek along that same line. So we've talked about Dallas, and he was like the fastest turbo combo deck that saw any success with his general game plan, whereas like Weavers didn't, for example. Did you see any other games that were like that on the fast finish side, or that were being controlled by more competitive decks?
Not noticeably. I mean, I had plenty of time to walk around and bird all kind of games. I mean, they were not ending super fast. Like nothing comes to mind in terms of anything that's like that fast, or even like a 6-turn game or whatever. Most of them seem to end around like what you'd expect, like maybe 9 to 11 turns, and some even went longer. Obviously, a number of matches went to time. So, I mean,
a total of 7 games went to time. So
across all rounds.
I wish I could have seen like the Phyrexian Censor and Mayhem Devil decks in action.
No, you don't.
No, you don't.
What, like watching paint dry?
So that was my first matchup, was both Censor and Mayhem Devil. And God, Scooby, I love you, buddy.
And this is no disrespect to Brownie or Scooby, whoever, but it feels like the Censor deck is kind of half baked. I'm not sold on it at all.
So I mean, it does have. So Scooby did pick up the list from Brownie, took some advice from Brownie. I don't think they, and I think Scooby would say this too, I don't think they had enough time with the deck, because it is, as I understand it to be, it is very much a white weenie, combat plan. So I didn't see any of that in the game that I was in, or the one that I observed. So I don't know if it was just a variance thing or what have you.
Yeah.
So, but also the Mayhem Devil, the young lady that played the Mayhem Devil, shout out to Luca. She'd only been playing Magic for 4 months. So Ryan,
and that's a complex deck. That's a complex deck with a lot of decisions.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
So Ryan and I talked about that. That was like our first impression, is like, why are you going to give like one of the most complicated trigger decks to a new player? But I mean that's me being a little judgmental, but like no, seriously, like it has so many decision points, and you have to be able to, if there was one deck offhand that I can think of that you absolutely have to understand, not know, but understand.
A lot of mental real estate for that deck.
Yeah. So she was doing the best that she could with what she had, for sure.
Yeah, and her dad was playing, I think, Malcolm Kedis, and he plays that in CDH. So it was his first time playing Pauper Commander, and it was a good translation for him. It was really funny. We did, Dave and I did an interview with him after the game that he won.
Yeah, that was where he beat me in Dallas, because I didn't know whether to remove his stuff or Dallas's, and Dallas was trying to save his counter spells to defend his own combo, and it was a little bit of table greed and a little bit of no one had quite enough interaction to deal with both of them.
It was a cool deck because it's very innocent. It's built from the perspective of somebody who's not like terribly familiar with Pauper Commander. I think he had like a lot of rituals and stuff like that, like very like turbo focused. It was really cool. I think it's a really neat take on the deck, but you don't see that stuff just because like people are very down on rituals in general in Commander and 100 card formats, which I think is in many cases is reasonable. But if you're leveraging for a specific purpose like that, I think it's a really interesting avenue to explore. So it's cool to see.
The irony of that is Tim, the guy that showed up for dinner the night prior, owner of Budget Brews and CDH Nexus, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
He was supposed to play in the event, and Puzzlebox and I actually built him a Malcolm Kedis deck that sounds very similar to that list. So there was supposed to be another one there.
So what I found really interesting was back in the days right before we banned Rhystic and Mystic, Malcolm and Kedis was super popular back then.
Get out of here.
And at the time, we all thought that maybe, this little nerf to blue might have some kind of effect on bringing blue into check in general, but I think it came out to be a lot more significant of a check to blue than any of us thought it would be. And Malcolm Kedis was the biggest thing you could point to as an example of that, because like anyone that's involved in the CPDH meta kind of around common connoisseurs and the home base, the general consensus has kind of become breaches is better. You need the card advantage. And Malcolm Kedis was only so incredibly powerful and popular before beyond breaches ability, because it had the additional extreme draw power of those two enchantments. And the game I had with, I think his name was Donovan, that was piloting Malcolm Kedis. In the game where he beat me in Dallas, he had Tavern Brawler deployed, and he had it deployed at the same time as, like half the time it was out, he also had like a combo piece on the field. So everyone was like, okay, do we blow up the value engine or do we blow up the combo piece? And in the end, he ended up, like, for the small investment of playing out Tavern Brawler, he ended up exiling like 6 cards, I think, off of it. And it was an insane amount of card advantage, and it just reminded me of playing against Malcolm Kedis back when it still had Rhystic. It felt incredibly similar in the worst way, but it was really cool, kind of like to take a step back and look at it.
Yeah. So to clarify the Malcolm Kedis thing as well, so Malcolm Kedis, the reason why it's considered the weaker version of the Malcolm X decks is because once you get Malcolm off the table a couple of times, Kedis does nothing. But Breaches does something in the absence of Malcolm. Dargo does something in the absence of Malcolm. That's why those had been favored for so long. But we've had a resurgence because of a bunch of CDH expats coming in. Plus you have Jonathan and Gatorbait and Puzzle who are trying to push the tempo of the format to kind of, and that's one way that they're doing it. That is, these low to the ground commanders.
So I don't think I've ever said this anywhere, but the way you use Dargo in your Malcolm Dargo deck, it reminds me very much of the way I originally built Molder Hulk when it was spoiled. So Molder Hulk is big Golgari creature. It has undergrowth.
I'm waiting for this to be a compliment or not.
Well, no. The whole way I built that deck was it has a built-in cost reduction. So you get the cost reduction up, you play out this big beady commander, and if someone removes it, that's great. It's effectively card advantage for you because you replay it practically for free. So you don't have card advantage in the traditional sense of card draw, but you have
resource
card advantage in terms of people are spending resources on you, and it's costing you nothing to return to your game plan. And that relates to the Malcolm choice, because to me, the role of Dargo is very similar to that, in that it doesn't give you card advantage. It absorbs other people's card advantage in the form of them spending their removal. So it still allows you to be in a better resource position than your opponents.
You can tell me I'm brilliant every day of the week. I'll take it.
No, I'm telling you, casual players did it first.
Well, I said this the other day, either in Discord or a tweet, and I seriously meant it, speaking of casual players, which to say that the pals are casual players, I'm starting to believe that to be somewhat of a misnomer, because they are super aggro. They just the big thing is they just don't block, so
So I've had some games and some long discussions with Sniff about exactly that, and what I was seeing was, so played some games with him. We had a bunch of what I call mid-power, you would probably call them high-power, clay, those kind of decks, not casual, not competitive. And Sniff's rolling up with his professed, Pals meta deck, and he hands another one to Puzzle Box, and he's playing that with us. And there's no distinguishable difference. And then I also gave Sniff my Savage Ventmaw deck, and they took it back and immediately played it in their streamed game. And I was seeing Savage Ventmaw like doing all the things, but it was played in a PAL style where it was a little less cutthroat. They used the fireball effect, the giant X spell, a little earlier to take out annoying pillow fort creatures instead of waiting one turn and using it to kill 3 players at once.
Mm-hmm.
So just it really drove my experience at the tournament was competitive and mid power closer than we thought. And my experience with interacting with Sniffhow was casual and mid power are also a lot closer than I thought. And it's mostly a gameplay thing, or it's very purposeful. I'm building my deck very suboptimally because that's what I want. Like it's meta, or it's
you look at it's just it's also just like a function of the card pool, right? Like there's so many effects that are just like redundant across the card pool, across the format. I use the phrase variations on a theme, right? Like there's fight spells, counter spells, burn spells, these sorts of categories, and then there's just little tweaks on all these different like versions of those effects. And the competitive decks play the same ones as the casual decks, so it really just comes down to like what you're using those cards for, and how you are interfacing with the game. And those are really the big differentiators. Other than that, like you're saying, Paul, it's very much aligned.
So I just had a thought talking about the distance being smaller. I would love to hear how Ruffigan felt about his experience playing Spitmare, because I just realized that when I was sitting across the table from him, the way I felt eyeing him nervously wasn't any different than the way I would view, a Gretchen or Disciple of Deceit player. Like there was the same level of, he's about to combo, isn't he? Well, he has this and this, he has this much mana. Like it was the exact same thought process, even though he was playing what would normally never be considered competitive. And I would be curious how he felt on the other end of that.
Well, that first game, I had the combo, but I did not have the indestructible card. So I was only able to get you down to 7 life in that game. But no, it was. I felt like I had enough interaction to get through all of the removal that people threw at me. I drew into my combo pretty much every single game. And if I didn't draw into it, I drew into Martyrdom or Gideon Sacrifice and attempted to kill someone just on the stack when they swung out.
And like that's that's not even a color pair known for its ability to dig or draw.
Yeah, like in the last game I played, the gut player swung at me for like 26 damage, and I attempted to redirect it at him, and unfortunately he had a prismatic strands to prevent it.
Such a good card.
But I was still able to throw it all at Spitmare to avoid dying that turn. So
yeah,
I thought it went really well. I mean, I don't think it was the most competitive deck, but definitely did better than I thought it was going to.
Well, had you the opportunity to do it all over again, would you play the same deck modified, or would you do something else?
I would still play the same. I think it was well situated, especially with all of the aggro decks. I felt like it was a pretty good choice. I think I made the mistake of putting in Red Elemental Blast and Pyro Blast because I had 2 games where I drew both of them, and one of them there was only one blue player who was not the issue. So I just kind of had two dead cards in hand for a while. But
in fairness, that's a topic that comes up a whole bunch in today's meta. Is how viable Pyro and Reb is. So
yeah, fair. I mean, it's something. I mean, textbook. It's reasonable to assume that the powerful decks are blue and they're going to combo, and you need something to stop the blue decks. But like, it's only borne out a percentage of the time. It's the metagame's so broad. It's not like CDH where every deck is blue deck. There's too many things to be doing, and like I said, it all comes back. Everybody's playing the same game. Everyone's playing on the same axis. So like, there's so many more things that are viable. You get a lot more variety that way. So I don't think you can bank on those nearly as much as you can in other formats. So we're trained to think you can.
You were going to complete that thought, Connor?
Yeah, go ahead.
Every time I drew them, I was just thinking I would have rather had Lightning Bolt.
Yeah.
Wait.
Yeah, every time I draw a card in any of my decks, I was like, man, I wish this was a Lightning Bolt.
Wait. You weren't playing Lightning Bolt?
No, I was playing Lightning Bolt. Okay. I was like, I wish this was like another really cheap removal option.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just checking. You're okay. You're playing a spite mare deck that redirects damage. Okay. Not playing like. Okay. Just checking.
Yeah.
And I think that card choice speaks to kind of our assumptions going into this tournament. We weren't expecting the half and half going there either, and like we were expecting to see more blue, more counter spells, more of the online version of what competitive looks like, and so we were packing anti-counter spell tech accordingly.
Yeah, I was on Gator and Puzzles podcast a few weeks ago. That at the time of this recording, a few weeks ago, that they had asked me to do a prediction of what I expected to see at RIW, and I predicted 20 to or 15 to 20% rogue, what we were calling rogue decks, and I thought that was high. Yeah, I thought that was high. That is now to that end. Having experienced the thing, I'm not so sure that RIW next year is going to be much different.
Probably not. Which is
that's something that I was debating with Puzzle. Was he was saying that he sees it's just a matter of time before the newer players become enfranchised players and play more meta decks, whereas I was arguing the opposite. Like, as it came up, I think yesterday in the Discord, someone said, like, why aren't we seeing, is it Guildmage and Tatyova? And one person's answer was because we don't have enough pilots. If you have
Ryan,
40 people trying to explore 100 decks, even if the 100 decks are all good, you aren't going to have them see play every time because you just don't have enough pilots. So that's kind of where I think we are, is as we flesh out our community and we have more people playing, it's not going to narrow the meta. It's going to mean that these decks that where we didn't have enough pilots before actually have pilots, and we're going to actually see a more diverse meta over time over the next year.
And if you want to metagame against counterspells, like Reb and Pyroblast are kind of like level 0, I think. But if you really want to just like punk out counterspells, think of all the best counterspells that are played, like the most common ones, right? You have like your negates, your spell pierces, your dispels, like those sorts of things. You know what? Those don't counter creatures. So just play more creatures and
be a pal.
Just make their cards dead. Like, just do that.
You know what Red Elemental Blast can't hit? Scare Tiller.
That's right. Play more Scare Tillers. Put a ranker on it.
Shout out. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but like you think about metagaming that way, right? Like, don't think of it in terms of like categories of cards that you're trying to metagame against, but more just like individual card selections that tend to be pretty broad and popular. Like counterspells are going to be there, and a lot of them don't hit creatures, so play a lot of creatures. And if they don't have counterspells, then you just have a bunch of creatures. So win-win. You just kind of like edge it out that way, just hedge. But yeah, like Reb and Pyroblast are a little narrow.
Well, on the counter, this is something that I've kind of, and I'm somewhat glad we're. The evolution of the game is kind of getting there. Like, at one point in time, it was believed that counterspells were the premium removal because the spell said counter target spell. And I was like, removal? Like, I mean, yeah, sure, you can encounter, you can counter something on the stack and that sort of thing. But, like, you should be playing, like, premium removal where you can, because not every deck is blue or has red or what have you, and you could still have the same efficacy with premium removal in your deck as well. So, like, play creatures, play removal.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the format's tremendously battlefield focused, and that's the one thing I think we learned in a huge way. Well, some people learned it. I knew this in a huge way going into the format or into the tournament. Just like it's all going to be decided on the battlefield. Like 90% of games. I talk about this all the time. It's just you have to attack. You have to attack people. You have to play creatures and attack or block. You just have to have something on the battlefield. Like it's wild to me, the people that just like.
Is it Guildmage does not make for a great attacker?
No, that's easy to kill.
So on the subject of counterspells, I definitely had that in my head. Not being a super entrenched competitive player before this, I just listened to you all and notice trends in what you all are talking about and try to extrapolate. But as far as the feel of the game, it's not something where I've lived in it for a long time. So I was definitely expecting counterspell magic to be held up even like, sure, it happened, but I was expecting it to be more omnipresent. And I was surprised seeing how many blue players had to tap out here or there just because the pace of the game demanded them develop their own board quicker.
Yeah, they can't take a turn off. Yeah, it's pretty simple like that. And like for me, like when I tend to play decks that are a little bit more aggressive, that like to attack a little bit more. If you haven't picked that up already, I tend to like creatures. So like when I play counter spells, there are counter spells that are specifically geared to protect my creatures. Things like Confound, Intervene, Dispel, like stuff to interact with removal. Exactly. So like I have a very focused role for what my counter spells are doing. Whereas like if you're just building like a deck that has counter spells and you just want to have them to interact with other players, like you really have to know what you're looking to go up against, because there's so many different counter spells and not all of them are going to be catch-alls like Counter Spell or Arcane Denial, right? You only have very limited access to those sorts of effects, like the carte blanche counter spells. In terms of like efficiency, I mean, you could always play like, you know, Urza's Rebuff or the 3-mana ones.
Even like stave off and vines, vines of Fastwood.
Yeah,
you know,
those are great.
Those can be counter spells in the right circumstance.
Yeah, they always talk about, you know, the pals and their holy trinity of Marching Duodrone and Howling Golem and Scare Chiller. Well, mine are Intervene, Vines, and Stave Off. The 3 best interactive spells ever printed, and any deck that can run them should run them, because they protect your things and they punk out your opponent's things when they try and do, you know, shifty things. Yeah, they're all really great, and you just have to kind of like you need to know what you're getting into with your interaction, like have a purpose for it, or else it's just going to flounder, and you're going to have kind of like weird mismatches where, like, you know, you're holding a counterspell up to deal with one certain thing, but then someone plays another thing that's just as threatening, and you have no response to it because your counterspell it's a negate, right? And they play like an annoying Altasaur, and now you have to fight a 6/5 that tramples, and you can't do anything about it.
You have to choose between countering the Altasaur if you have one of those counter spells, or countering the thing it cascades into.
Sure. Yeah, maybe that's not the best example, but you know, like a big thing that's just going to beat you to death.
All right.
So I have a little shift, a little pivot that I'd like to propose. So earlier, Paul said that Tavern Brawler reminded him of 2 cards that were previously banned by the RC. Thank God, get out of here, you know, what have you. How many Oubliettes did you see played at the event, and did you have any meaningful experience? Well, this is
I think I saw one.
Since the broad overtone of the conversation is regarding the philosophy doc that we've been working in the background and that sort of thing, I figured we would be remiss if we didn't at least briefly converse on something that maybe not we have suggested as ban-worthy, but other folks in the community had considered at one time to be ban-worthy, that sort of thing. Not
just
that,
putting more of a plain face on it, the RC has discussed Oubliette a bit, and the consensus was much more on the side of it's not actually a problem, especially when looking at both casual and competitive. It can be a problem in casual, but it's not an overwhelming one, and also it's very difficult to say it's any kind of problem in competitive. And going on that last bit, we saw talking to everyone else that we knew, it sounded like there was only one Oubliette played the entire tournament, even though I took Oubliette in my deck with the explicit purpose of trying to play it on clay and didn't get my chance.
So variation, you know, and then opportunity. And there was 44 lists. I don't remember exactly how many were black, and it's probably safe to assume that every Black X list was playing Oubliette. So if we assume that there was a decent percentage, I'm trying to remember offhand.
There was at least 8, I think, at least 8 black decks.
Yeah. So there was an opportunity to see Oubliette more than one time.
Yeah, well, here, let me just reveal one of my strengths, talking about why something should or should not be allowed in the format. So Oubliette is a card that, in a competitive sense, is not too problematic, because the main issue with the card, for those of you, and the main reason why this pops up as a conversation point every once in a while, is because you can use Oubliette to target people's commanders and phase them out. So you can't put it back in the command zone. People find this to be problematic for many reasons, especially in casual games. because some decks are not well set up to destroy enchantments, and because the format has much more of a focus on the commander itself, people tend to spin this into a narrative of I can no longer play Magic, which to get this out of the way is not true. But that said,
spoiler alert.
Yeah, there's a lot of nuance to these discussions about like when, because certain colors are better at enchantment removal than others. Black is not great at it. Red has very, very, very limited options. None of them are particularly efficient. So, like, you get into this discussion of like, where's the line? Like, when should a card be banned because mono red cannot effectively deal with it in a way that people are comfortable playing? Like you have to play Goblin Firebomb or like those artifacts that are destroying permanents. But then again, like I play Dragon Rage Channeler where over the course of a game, it's been enchanted by like 2 separate witness protections at 2 separate times. And like, I can't remove that card. So like, should that card be banned too? Like you invite a lot of questions like that. And it's all about finding a line. And I don't think it's a line where Oubliette needs to be banned. The second part of it is I view it personally as a social problem, right? Like Oubliette is not a card that says target commander is phased out. It's a card that says target creature is phased out. People are using it specifically to target commanders, which is a social problem, not a mechanical problem. The feedback that we've gotten is that a lot of groups are self-selecting to just not play the card in their playgroups, which solves the problem for us. Social problem, social solution. That seems ideal to me.
And
because there are people that
even in competitive games, even in competitive games, we have found this calendar year, that with decks that can't handle removing an Oubliette, what Oubliette means is remove target player. You're stopping me from doing the thing that I need to do. I need to get you off the board so my commander is free and I continue on with my game plan.
Right. And in those games, again, like it self-corrects a lot of the time. There are games where it'll feel bad and a player doesn't feel like they can meaningfully play anymore, and then they'll concede or make a big, it'll cause a problem, whatever. Like that happens in a non-zero amount of games. But there's other cards that do that. The problem, again, is not mechanical, it's social. And I feel like socially it's been handled pretty effectively. People just choose not to play it if they don't like it. And the playgroups that are fine with it continue to do so. And I assume enjoy their time playing with it.
And providing a little nuance, I guess, I was the one kind of championing the idea counter to that of just because people are choosing not to play it doesn't mean that it's not a problem, because what we saw with Rhystic, specifically Rhystic Study, that was much more of a problem in the casual sphere, was that just because people were mostly not playing it didn't make it not a casual problem.
But the problem with Mystic and Rhystic is that those cards are mechanically obscene. Oubliette is not that. Oubliette is being used in a specific way to make people feel bad, and people just don't play with the card because they don't like it, which is fine. And I feel like if they're going to self-select for it, and the people that want to play with it still can, there's no reason for us to remove the card entirely from the format if we can kind of have our cake and eat it too in this situation, which I think is what's happening.
The reason I was bringing it up wasn't to negate your point, but
I understand that.
In our conversation behind closed doors, it wasn't like that was the end-all be-all argument. There were other viewpoints considered in that, and the viewpoint of it's really not problematic. People aren't the opportunity to use it in a problematic way is not coming up very often. That idea still won out, but we did consider the opposite as well.
Yeah.
Well, I got more.
Yes, that's all. That's the Cliff Notes version. All I've said about that.
I got more meat out of that than I anticipated. But the reason why I wanted to highlight Oubliette specifically is because that is a conversation that has happened once again in the modern era under the premise of what is our guiding philosophy? How are we operating, in the spheres of, casual and competitive and everything in between? What is the impact, and this is the doc at work,
And kind of another aspect of that was talking about red not being able to deal with enchantments. And similar to just a few minutes ago, we mentioned Rhystic and Mystic. We thought a small side effect of that might be tamping down the dominance of blue. And that did work, and that's great, but that wasn't necessarily the point of the ban. It was just a small little side thing. And that's one thing we do cover in the philosophy document, is the idea that we will consider balance between colors, but ultimately that's not it's not the main thing
goal,
we're going. Like kind of going back to the universes beyond, or like a card price debates out in the larger Magic sphere, like the EDHRC points to those sometimes, and like kind of saying this is more of in Wizards' realm as opposed to our realm, and we kind of are following that same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I mean that's an interesting case. Like it's a good example of like, I don't know, a card that can seem like ban-worthy on its face, but I think when you start peeling it back, there's just like a lot of things that just like self-correct about the card. And I think the fact that you just don't see it that often is like a credit to how like the community at large can just kind of like self-correct without us needing to like add cards to a banned list. I think that's like a last resort. Like,
even I have second thoughts about adding it to a list now, because especially if it's a if it's a mono black list, there's a high degree of likelihood that it's going to happen. But that's because the double black pips, right?
That's what I was going to say. It's part of the reason I definitely included it in Viscopa's, because I was running Gary at the time. Who cares about the black pips?
Yeah.
So it's a matter of anymore, because the format, well, the CPDH side of the house is speeding up. Feel like in the last 6 months we've kind of shaved 2 turns off. So because it's speeding up, that 3 mana cost is not necessarily a premium. Plus you add in the social dynamic of, do I have a bounce spell to get rid of Oubliette? And so I'm going to quote Gatorbait here. He's like, if I'm playing a Blue X commander and you Oubliette my commander, I'm going to let you have it. And the reason why is because I'm going to bank my boomerang effect, and then when it's time, I'm just going to bounce it and combo off. And everybody's going to think it's going to give me the reason to possum. And everybody's going to think I'm not a threat because I'm stuck under Oubliette, which is not the case.
And that's kind of exactly what me and Ruffigan did whenever we were in our first game together with Sprite Dragon and Gut. Me and him both, I think at the same time at one point, had lockdown enchantments on our commanders, the kind that turn him into 1/1s. And eventually we traded them in combat with each other and smiled at each other and kind of like psychically high five.
Yeah.
But until then, we were just milking it like, we aren't threats, attack each other.
Yeah. I mean, it's something where, like, if you're playing a competitive environment, like, these cards exist, and if they, remove you from the game entirely, then you should have a plan for it, essentially, is how I look at it. In a casual game, like, trust your play group. If you're playing with, randoms, then, like, talk about it beforehand. Like, people like to clown on Rule Zero conversations or pre-game conversations, whatever you want to call it. And it's just like, if you have cards that are going to engender a bad experience with other players, or you suspect that they might, then have that conversation. Like, it's a social format. Like, people need to remember this.
So this is probably the arena in which we should spend more effort in promoting, discussing, fleshing out, because you kind of stirred something in my brain. Like, so like. For the website, for the conversations that we have in the competitive realm, like CPDH only exists because it is an explicit understanding of a Rule Zero premise. So we don't talk about it all the time because it's one of those things that we just naturally understand. But I feel like on whole, we should be talking more about, because Rule Zero for PALs is going to look more different than home games, which more different than LGS is. Like, these people should be having these conversations.
Rule Zero might help to specify. Are you talking about how we're going to play, or are you talking about pod construction?
Everything.
Yeah, it's all social contract stuff. All that stuff falls under that purview to me. And it's like, I don't know, like, if I roll up with an Oubliette and it's like, by the way, there's an Oubliette in this deck, I'm not targeting anyone's commander with it. It's just like, I use it as an Oblivion Ring, whatever. Like, those sorts of things. Just, be considerate of your fellow players. Understand that, like, casting an Oubliette on somebody's commander might make you feel powerful, but it might make someone else feel bad.
And that gives him the opportunity. Yeah, because if you say that, okay, Oubliette's in the deck, I'm not going to use it to target your commanders. It's only going to be used for pieces, blah, blah, blah. Their retort may be, oh, we're fine with that.
Yeah,
sure. at the beginning of this, we said something about theories and stuff that this tournament seemed to prove. So on the other side of that, back when we were having that Oubliette debate, my play groups have always been self-selecting and not playing Oubliette. But I really, really expected Oubliette to show up a lot more, or at least when it was there to be deployed on commanders a lot more. And I'm not sure if it's just no one drew it, but I was very surprised that it only happened once. That's kind of something where I had a theory and it was wrong.
Well, I mean, in fairness, this. Oh, Connor, you were going to say something?
I think another minor point, like when Rhystic Study was still legal, people were using their Drift of Phantasms and Perplexes to grab Rhystic Study out of their deck, and I don't think anyone's really doing that to get Oubliette.
And going back to what Clay was saying about opportunity, Rhystic Study, anytime it came out, all it had to do was be on the field, and the opportunity was taken advantage of. Whereas Oubliette, you have to have more niche circumstances. There has to be a commander that is worth Oublietting, and their deck has to not have many ways to get rid of Oubliette, and it needs to be politically viable for you to do that, and someone else isn't the bigger threat right now. Like, there's just a lot of things that have to line up, and that's what I was discounting, thinking that it would see more play in a problematic way.
Yeah, I don't think it does. There's a lot of like high temperatures around it. Like, people get very upset about the card and very worked up. But it's something that you kind of just have to talk about dispassionately, and like, I don't know. It's a hard card to have a conversation about, but I think it's something that is it can be used in a way that is not great, but I don't think that's the way that it's manifesting largely in the games where it's played. I think that leaving as many things unbanned as possible, because Oubliette is a very evocative card for Pauper players. I mean, it's a cornerstone of like Pauper. It's been a part of that format for since its inception, really. And people like that stuff. People love playing with their favorite cards. And it's a commander thing. I mean, that's the reason why I love Commander. I can play with all my favorite cards. That's the reason why I love Pauper Commander. I play with all my favorite cards in a way that I want to play. People like Oubliette. It seems hard to believe, but there are people who really like the card. So leaving it available for them to play with and have a resonant experience with, I think is a net positive. And if people are willing to solve the problem themselves and just not play it if they don't like it, then that's the ideal scenario.
And then on the competitive side, like, I think it was both Puzzle and Gator I heard say multiple times over the course of the weekend that Oubliette is just bad.
I don't think it's very good in a competitive environment either.
Yeah. And I think there's room to reevaluate that. I still think it can work in a competitive environment, just because what we saw was there's a lot of talk about the turn 4 and 5 wins and how that means removal has to be incredibly cheap. But with all of the non-competitive decks running around, we were seeing a lot of slower, more value-focused removal getting thrown around. I was guilty of it, and it was working all right. So I think there is a little bit of the CEDH brain rot kind of perceptions getting mixed and things being called non-viable when they can.
Sure.
And me and Clay were talking about how the other day it was Ryan. We were talking about how there are a lot of decks just not running.
Guess Ryan's on the RC now.
Well, we were just talking about Viscopa, and we were talking about whether or not to include Oubliette, and we were saying that we thought it was like Oubliette's in a decently strong position meta-wise, just because there's so many decks that are choosing not to even consider it in deck building. They have they're just going to try to win before Oubliette can come down.
Yeah, that's reasonable.
Damn it! I was gonna ask you something. I lost it, and then you compared me to Ryan. you bastard! God, it was good. It was so good too. It'll come back. I'm sure it'll come back.
Yeah. I think that's a pretty decent touch on Oubliette.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Want to round that out? Want to round that out, Connor?
I've been taking it out of my decks, so I think it's slow. It's
So, and two. So the interaction, Paul. This isn't what I was. The idea that I was, or that I forgot. But like
You'll
Paul
get
was
it back as soon as we stop.
Paul was preferencing removal that was favorable to his game plan, so producing a food token or something to that effect. So there was a homogeneity revolving around that. I don't know
And
exactly.
the reason I would put Oubliette in that category is, to me, it's more decks that want to slow the game down. They could, if they manage to get Oubliette in that favorable scenario where it's on a commander, maybe that replaces, if it had been any other removal, they would have had to follow it up with another removal spell to keep that commander off the field. That's why I kind of think of Oubliette in the value slow removal camp. Anyway.
Yeah.
Right on. Damn it, I wish I could. It was a nice segue, and I can't remember what that was.
Do it without the segue. Whatever you're going to do.
Damn it. Okay. Maybe it'll come back. No, so regarding the philosophy doc, and so just kind of do a brief recap. We're at an hour and 15, so probably got a 15 minutes to kind of close everything out, or else nobody's going to watch like the good part at the end, right? Unless they're going to skip to the end. Now, I will be putting chapters in the video, so that way people, one's going to say, Oubliette.
Sure.
So everybody's going to watch the last part of the video and nothing on the front. Okay, so we talked about the philosophy doc. We talked about a real life example of where we were exercising. Now, to point out, we're not going to link that or anything. It's still something that's privately held within the RC server.
Yep.
We're
getting close.
Yeah.
It'll, like we're talking about, like within the next month or two, we want to have it public. We need to do some last little tweaks, but we've been using it behind the scenes in our yes or no ban discussions, as well as just in discussions about how we're looking at the format. So it's coming.
It's in play. Yeah. So I mean, by the time we put out the video, and then because it's going out today or tomorrow, within just a couple of months of the release of this video, it'll be there. So it's already actively being used. We had RIW as a great test bed for looking at the philosophy in regard to like social dynamics, and more specifically, that was a competitive scene. I don't know if that would change much if it was like, for example, who's going to Vegas?
Not me.
So
Maybe.
okay, so potentially, what I'm interested in seeing is, Vegas is going to be the command zone, the larger area. Hopefully by then we've had merch or something that identifies us as like Pauper Commander rebels and that sort of thing, and we're able to generate a couple of tables worth of gameplay. And I'd be really excited to see how, in that open environment in a non-competitive setting, how the Rule Zero conversations, pan out. See how we can extrapolate philosophy input from that. I'm kind of interested in seeing that.
I just had an idea. So I've been still intend to buy a whole bunch of new decks and take them with the intent of giving them away if they can get anyone into the format. I want to put together in paper like 10 or 15 new paper decks before Vegas, and hopefully give away a lot of them. But another opportunity that we could do is purposefully mix competitive and mid-power decks, just as a demonstration of, like, this is one of the top cutting edge decks, and this is just something that was slapped together, and look, they still play just fine together. I doubt that's really needed for introducing new people, but just an idea.
Yeah, it's interesting.
I did apply for the creator badge, and with the creator badge, comes the opportunity of getting on a panel. And should I get on a panel, I'm letting you know now, whatever rules committee members are in attendance, I'm going to be snagging you, because that's going to be our opportunity to stand on a stage and profess the godly goodness of PDH, and I'm not going to
So
be doing it alone.
I think the pals, Liam from the PDH pod, and you have, and maybe Ryan. There's a lot of PDH people applying for the content creator pass, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I get. I think you get two passes. So I'll have under the guise of.
I didn't know one application could get you two. My reading of it was just like, if you have, the PDH pals have a ton of people and only two of them can get the passes was what but I thought they still had to apply separately.
I have to check that out, but I think
anyway.
I think your crew gets a because you're there to make content. So whatever it is they give me, if I have extra, I'm going to be doling that out to some fortunate person to tag along with me behind the scenes and all that stuff.
I've got a fun question to kind of bring us home. Unless there's anything else, Clay, that you want to discuss.
No, I think we touched
I have a wrap up thing also, but I can go.
Just something I was curious. After this last tournament, is there anything competitive that you all have your eyes on that you want to build and work on that you saw that was interesting to you?
I mean, I've had my eye on a few things. Just the idea of bringing mid-range closer to competitive has just given me more motivation to take these things that I see as powerful, and instead of just building them for the usual mid-power level that I play at, instead just try to tweak them a little more towards playing against competitive decks and try to take them into that sphere as rogue decks.
Yeah.
And admittedly, that's because of people joking around like, what rogue deck is Scarecrow going to bring next to RIW?
It's funny.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say on that Sunday after everyone had left, I think it was just me, Eric from the Pals, Dave, Scooby was there, and Ryan. There's six of us. We played Emperor games, Pauper Commander Emperor games, and I gave Dave my Heritage Druid deck to play, and it was one of those things where it's just it's a deck that doesn't make any sense until you play it, and he was playing it, and it was just holy cow, this deck makes so much sense now that I drew a 7.
That's how I felt getting.
Luckily, Snip, I was able to punk him out with Cercara, and I was able to take him out. But if it wasn't for that, I would have just fucking lost the game. But it's one of those things where until you pick up a deck and draw 7 and see how it plays, you can only glean so much information from a deck list, right? So Clay, is there anything that you're looking at that interests you from the weekend?
So I not from the weekend. My interest in the weekend, moving forward, is not relative to any specific deck. I'm highly concerned about the habits of archetypes. So the thing that I was going to say about Paul and his mid-range expression. So falsely, people look at the delta between combo decks, aggro decks, and mid-range decks, and mid-range has a double-digit negative percentage win rate. So it's 12%, and people are using that unfairly and unjustly. They're using that as an opportunity to say, well, archetype's not good, blah blah blah. Well, the problem what they're not understanding is combo is easy. You try to assemble a couple of cards. You're trying to do it as quickly as possible, and you win. It's aggro and mid range that are hard. That's who that's the true masters. Yes, I said it. The true masters are trying to exploit.
Well, here's the thing: they each have challenges, right? Mid range decks are very challenging to build, and aggro decks are very challenging to play.
Mid-range and I think have to know the meta better in order to have success. So when you have events where you don't know what you're facing, it's a disadvantage.
You heard it here, folks. So in that regard, I'm very excited in watching the development. So these are we talked about earlier, the aggro deck, how it's supposed to perform in the pod and that sort of thing. I'm trying to move forward off of RIW from a mentor, a coaching perspective of this is maybe we need to experiment this way. I don't know if that's the right answer, but this is the way we need to kind of employ these types of archetypes in this whatever way. So
and kind of dovetailing off that, for me it's one very specific thing. His name was David. He played Aranis Street Urchin in the tournament, and I think his list is really interesting. And I really want to work on Aranis and Street Urchin.
His deck list to.
I think there's a lot. There's a lot to tinker with in that list. There's a lot of changes that I would make personally, just from how I like to play. But it's like a really great example of like something that, like, I think it's firmly a mid-range deck. People think of it more controlling, but the way that he builds it with like a lot of ramp, you play the big things, and you just kind of like take out stuff as you need to create pressure.
Yeah,
is a really engaging way, I think, to interact with format, because removal spells are so tough to metagame with. Like, that's a problem with mid range, right? You like your removal suites have to be very tailored to what you expect to face, and much in the way that control decks have that same problem. And Aranis just has it like in the command zone, pretty indiscriminate, just like kills creatures as it wants to. And there's really great ways to tailor different suites in order to maximize. Yeah, like for example, like how I'm approaching it right now is like all kinds of like creatures, the ETBs generate a ton of resources. Things like Wood Elves, Farhaven Elf, Springbloom Druid, Sylvan Ranger, Elvish Mystic, Elvish Visionary, all these things that just get you all these resources. So you're just like flushed with mana, cards, things to sacrifice, and then you just ramp into like initiative stuff, Monarch stuff, a lot of stuff that he's been doing, like Dread Lenorm, Fang Dragon, like these huge things that just beat people to death.
And he was playing stickers.
Yeah, he was playing stickers. I don't like the sticker stuff personally. I have a very big distaste for stickers, but I think it's a really cool route to go. It's just not for me, so I'm probably going to steer clear of it in my explorations. But I think this list is really cool, so I'm kind of going to take a crack at Aranis Street Urchin for the next little while and work on something.
One thing I would say that's kind of changed how I thought about stickers was, instead of thinking it as this crazy, wacky, random thing, I've started to think of it instead kind of like how we think of white. Its removal is slower, but tends to be more versatile. I'm starting to think of there's the spells that give you 2 tickets and let you put a sticker on something, and you're also getting the regular effect of the spell. I'm starting to think of those as flexibility pieces in a list, where you get a little additional value for doing something slower and with some uncertainty to it.
I just want to minimize like the mental real estate that I have to devote to something like that. I can't memorize sticker sheets. My brain doesn't work that way anymore. So I'm just going to nix it and do something else. But like, there's even in like the Lord of the Rings set, there's a card, Brandywine Farmer. It's a 3-mana 1/1. It ETBs, it makes a food, leaves the battlefield, makes a food. Like, that's a great Aranis card. So like, it's just a lot of really cool stuff you can do.
Yeah, 3 sacrifice fodders.
Connor?
Oh, I was going to say Aranis Street Urchin as well, because I played them both back to back, and it was interesting that both of their gameplay styles were, I mean, they were both using their commander's removal, but the one had a bunch of creatures pressuring people's life totals. The other guy was just playing strict control, just making sure no one could combo off, and just that they were both able to pivot to what they wanted to do when they needed to do it.
I think it's really well positioned right now, honestly, and like the competitive meta games that like we see more established. I think it's really, really well positioned in the same way that, like, I don't know, I think that removal in general, that's like non-black removal, things like bounce spells, I think are really powerful right now. I think Street Urchin and Aranis is just like a combination that's really well equipped to capitalize on like a very creature heavy metagame.
All right, Paul, you got a closer? We got a couple minutes left.
So in our show notes, we had things to talk about with the metagame, and we kind of touched on Oubliette, which is both a past, present, and future thing, because I'm sure there will be occasionally people that talk about it still. But
you mean like backgrounds?
Yeah.
Oh, do you need me to talk about?
No, it's fine.
How much time we got?
We can get that these nests another time. So just I wanted to run through a few things that are generally mentioned in the philosophy doc, thinking about RIW and were they problems there.
Yeah.
So things that are positive about the format that we want. Lots of chances for people to feel like they did the thing. It's an inclusive experience. Did you all feel like you saw that?
Yeah, almost every game that I saw. Yeah,
and we saw a variety, right?
Except when Gator got punked out by Sprite Dragon.
Yeah,
he still did his thing. He got him down to 5 life.
That's true. Yep.
We saw a variety of archetypes. We saw a variety of colors, right?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. We didn't see people really get excluded from the game. Cool. Did we see...
Except for the Phyrexian censor games.
Oh, I mean, did you feel like anyone was really excluded from the game, though?
No, I'm being a whiny child.
Yeah. Insert whole other discussion about how long timed games should be.
Sure.
I'll leave that to you tournament grinder people.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, just in terms of how we're moving forward, did we get anything negative out of this? I don't think we did. And I just wanted to reemphasize that, and that my overall opinion was the format's in an excellent place, and this was some great data to add to that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the Rule Zero thing that we touched on, probably, like, if we were going to do this again, which we are, having a conversation with RIW or any other organizer that basically speaks to, like, because they put out some printed material that says, hey, this is a competitive event, that
Mhm.
sort of thing. They even put out a tweet or some message in their Discord, but it wasn't widely distributed about, the normal take backsy thing that you normally get to get.
Sure.
You probably won't have that. I would like to see larger even the echoing of that, like, hey, this is what the established Rule Zero is. This is what your expectations should be before you even sit down at the table. And I think
Right.
that would probably cure like some of the expectations of it being a 1v1. That would cure, that would cure a number of things. And I'm not saying the onus is on us to make enforce that, but we should
Yeah.
definitely be there supporting that. I think so. I think that'd be the only maybe addendum to what you were talking about, like what we saw.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
You were going to say
That's
something?
good. No. I agree with what you were saying. Yeah.
You want to close this out, Connor?
Play Pauper EDH.
There you go.
My man. All right, cool. So
Yeah.
I guess until we'll have to do another one of these after the next thing where we have it was imperative. Like, we were trying to get Dave on, but Dave had other commitments. He was the final person that was.
Well, I mean, after the next Sanctuary event, Dave and I will be doing. Oh no, Dave's not going to be doing commentary for that.
He's going.
I will be.
Yeah.
I will be. So maybe we after that tournament we can circle back.
Right on.
And I set it as a personal goal for me to be in that tournament.
I'm gonna play in the Sanctuary event because I feel like part of my real estate is actually as a competitor in the events.
Why don't you just never play Magic again and just commentate? You can talk about Magic. That's what I like to do.
So that sounds like fun, but you do that really good, and just there'd be this imbalance there.
I make you look bad.
Exactly.
Understood.
Again. So
sure.
So yeah, I'll be playing in that. So yeah, this is it would be a good opportunity, especially since the interview series that I was doing to kind of get everybody's faces out. I was able to get 7 RC members. The final 3 just have an aversion to being on camera or being with me. So a nice natural pivot that allows for some continued exposure is to kind of get our reactions to our experiences in this.
And honestly, like with the next Sanctuary event in August, about a month out now. In the meantime, Defiant's also doing Friday Night Magic kind of stuff, leagues, all kinds of stuff to allow the metagame to kind of evolve in between RIW and the next Sanctuary, tentpole event. So there'll be plenty of time for things to evolve, stuff people to work on, and we'll see hopefully some really cool, interesting tech.
Yeah, I was talking to Defiant about being on tomorrow's. I mean, it's supposed to be a competitive pod, but I was joking around I don't have that many competitive decks. I could just bring some mid-power. It's like, play what you want.
Yeah. It'll probably be fine.
I'll also be streaming Community Day tomorrow as well, so there's an opportunity
Right
to
on.
blow
Nice.
back and forth. I'll be debuting my TPI list that I've been working on post RIW. So
Yeah. Cool.
Sweet. All right. Until the next time, viewers, this is your friendly neighborhood, at least part of them anyway, Rules Committee members.
Yeah.
You can find us at all the places. Connor's still exclusively as Ruffigan on the subreddit, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then Scarecrow has been expanding his empire into other places.
Last year a little bit. Nah, Instagram was a failed experiment. Too many pictures, too little text.
Yeah.
Here's a card. It's almost like Scryfall. And then Derek is everywhere, but more.
I'm on Discord very sparingly. I don't like it. I'm on Twitter most engagingly, and also have a Blue Sky invite, so I'm on there now too.
Sweet.
Derek, dear reader, I post things sometimes about Pauper Commander.
Sweet. All right, and then my name is Clay. I'm an idiot. I'm an idiot with
You're an idiot, yeah.
I'm an idiot with a microphone. And a YouTube channel. So yeah. Come follow me, bro. All right, guys.
Yeah.
Catch you on the flip.
Yeah.